How's it going, everybody? My name is Vigilance, but you can just call me Vigil. And just like the Watchmen, I'm an observer of the multiverse. And trust me, I've seen some freaky things. But that's not what today's video is about. No, today's video is about a man whose struggles began before he even drew breath. Yet, through sheer determination, sharp intellect, and an indomitable will, he carved his own path and rose to become one of the Dark Knight's greatest foes. Ladies and gentlemen, today's video is all about Bane. Now, Bane's story begins far from Gotham, in the tiny Caribbean nation of Santa Prisca. It's a place riddled with poverty, corruption, and a ton of violence. Now, Bane's life was marked by cruelty before he even drew breath. His father, a revolutionary who rebelled against the corrupt government, escaped justice by fleeing the country, but the regime demanded that someone pay his sentence. In a grim twist of fate, they decided the punishment would fall on his unborn child, and from the moment Bane was born, he was condemned to serve his father's life sentence inside the walls of the Peña Duro prison. Now, Bane's childhood became an endless education and suffering. The prison guards showed no mercy to a boy growing up in their custody. He was forced to share cells with hardened criminals, to fight simply to survive, and to endure isolation when he resisted. The boy's earliest toys were knives carved from scraps, and his lullabies were the screams of inmates echoing down the cold corridors. Now, despite such a hostile upbringing, Bane refused to be broken. He taught himself to read and absorbed every book that passed through the prison walls. He studied history, science, philosophy, and military strategy with the same discipline that he applied to hardening his own body. The environment shaped him into more than a survivor. Each day demanded strength, and Bane embraced the challenge. He developed a strict regimen of exercise, transforming himself into a figure of intimidating physical power. Now, at the same time, his sharp mind flourished, giving him the ability to analyze and plan with the precision of a master tactician. Even as a child, inmates and guards alike began to fear and respect him. He learned to use fear as a weapon, long before he ever set foot in Gotham. Now, by the time he grew into manhood, Bane was more than a prisoner. He was a legend inside Peña Duro, a man who turned his cage into a crucible. His early life was a brutal experiment, one that produced not only a formidable warrior, but a strategist with the patience and intellect to topple empires. Now, his first lesson in the world was clear. No matter the walls or the chains, he'd never be just another victim of circumstance. Bane's life in Peña Duro reached a turning point when the prison authorities decided to turn his body into something more than human. Now, by then, he was already notorious within those walls. The child who had grown into a man with iron discipline, frightening strength, and a mind sharper than most of his captors. The government saw an opportunity. Deep in the laboratories hidden within the prison, scientists were conducting dangerous experiments on a mysterious super steroid known as Venom. Now, previous test subjects hadn't survived the process as their bodies were tearing themselves apart under the strain, but Bane was chosen to be the next candidate, and not because anyone believed he'd succeed or even survive, but because he was just considered expendable. The preparation was as brutal as the life that Bane had already endured. The experiments strapped him down, forcing injections of venom directly into his bloodstream. The first surge nearly killed him, as a wave of agony wrecked his muscles and left his heart straining to keep pace. But, unlike those before him, Bane survived. And his survival didn't just mark him as different, it marked him as dangerous. The drug coursed through him, amplifying the strength he had already spent years forging, pushing his body into a new realm of power. His muscles swelled with impossible density, and his endurance seemed almost endless. The scientists equipped him with a unique system. It was a series of tubes and a control device that pumped venom directly into his brain at will. And by activating the flow, Bane could increase his strength to levels that dwarfed even the most powerful men alive. The transformation was intoxicating, but it came with a cost. See, Bane quickly discovered that venom was both his greatest weapon and his greatest weakness, as extended use threatened to cause him to get addicted, chaining him to the very compound that made him formidable. Still, Bane didn't flinch. No, he accepted the risk, believing his willpower alone could master anything, even dependency on the drug. Once the experiments ended, Peña Duro could no longer hold him. The prison had unintentionally forged not only a monster of physical dominance, but a strategist who understood fear, power, and patience. Venom became the final piece of the weapon he'd been crafting his entire life. Now, his body was a towering engine of destruction, and his mind carried the clarity of a man who'd already conquered death countless times. When he looked beyond the prison walls, he no longer saw a cage. No, he saw a world waiting to be bent to his will. Bane's most notable moments in the comics stand out because they reveal the rare combination of raw power, brilliant strategy, and unwavering discipline that makes him one of Batman's greatest enemies. His legend truly began the moment he set his sights on Gotham City. From the shadows of Peña Duro, he had heard of the Batman. a figure who ruled a city through fear, and he knew instinctively that to prove himself the master of fear, he had to break the bat. Now, unlike most of Batman's rogues, who attacked recklessly or sought attention, looking at you, Joker, Bane began with patience. He spent weeks studying his opponent, learning his movements, his allies, and the rhythms of his nightly war on crime. See, Bane wanted to know not only how Batman fought, but who he was beneath the cowl. His first grand strike came with the infamous plan that would shake Gotham to its very core. Bane freed the inmates of Arkham Asylum all at once, unleashing Joker, Scarecrow, Mad Hatter, and countless others into the streets. Gotham became a nightmare carnival of villains, and Batman was forced into a relentless gauntlet. Night after night, the Batman fought without rest, his body battered, his mind pushed to beyond exhaustion, but Bane never interfered, because the true brilliance of his plan was that he didn't need to. He let the city itself wear Batman down, bleeding away every ounce of strength. Only when he knew his enemy had reached the breaking point did Bane finally reveal himself. Now, Bane's march into Wayne Manor still remains as one of the most chilling demonstrations of his dominance. See, he didn't wait for the Batman in the alleys of Gotham or even lure him into a trap. No, he walked straight into the sanctuary that represented safety and control. There, in the heart of Bruce Wayne's life, Bane shattered the illusion of security. Now, the fight was brutal, but relatively short, because Batman was already worn down to the bone. Bane lifted him up high and brought him crashing down across his knee, snapping his back. That single image became one of the most famous in comic history. The moment the unbreakable Dark Knight was broken. Bane proved himself the one enemy who could dismantle Batman completely in both body and spirit. Now, Batman did eventually recover and return to the cowl, but Bane's reputation never faded. He became known across the underworld as the man who had broken the bat, a title that elevated him beyond ordinary rogues. Bane's later life in the comics continued to expand his reputation far beyond the moment he broke Batman. Once he had claimed that victory, he moved past the walls of Gotham and sought to carve his place in the wider world. He became a mercenary leader, a strategist for hire, and in some cases, a ruler who seized territory through strength and intellect. Every campaign he launched showed that he was not only a fighter, but also a man capable of directing armies and controlling entire regions. Bane's ambition stretched beyond a single city, and he often saw himself as a conqueror destined to command respect wherever he went. A major turning point came when he chose to free himself from Venom. The substance has been his greatest weapon, yet it had also been his greatest weakness. And rather than let it define him, Bane endured the torment of withdrawal, locking himself away until his body no longer depended on the drug. Surviving that ordeal proved that his discipline was even greater than his strength. From that point forward, he often fought without Venom, relying instead on the mind and body he had forged since childhood. Victories without the compound even carried far more weight, as they were won by his true self, rather than by some chemical power. In this stage of his life, his connection to Batman even took on new layers. Although the two still remained enemies at heart, there were times when circumstances forced them to work together. When greater threats endangered the world or Gotham itself, Bane stood alongside the Dark Knight. Their alliance, of course, forged by necessity rather than actual friendship. But these moments revealed that he was not ruled by blind hatred or chaos, but by pragmatism and an iron sense of control. See, Bane could set aside rivalry when it suited his goals, which made him more dangerous and unpredictable than villains who were just driven by obsession alone. Regardless, Bane never abandoned his desire to claim Gotham as his own. In fact, on multiple occasions, he returned to the city, orchestrating invasions and schemes designed to cement his authority. Sometimes he succeeded in taking control, turning Gotham into a city under his rule, even if only for a time. Within the criminal underworld, his name commanded both fear and respect. To some, he was the man who had broken the bat. To others, he was a commander whose discipline and intelligence rivaled his physical power. Later stories also revealed a different side of Bane, one tied to blood and legacy. He discovered that he had a daughter, Vengeance, who had been subjected to the same cruel experimentation that once shaped him. Now, their relationship gave his character unexpected depth. He was still ruthless, don't get me wrong, still willing to use violence to achieve his ends, yet he also sought to guide and protect her. The man, who had grown up in chains, now understood what it meant to leave something behind, even if it was forged in the same crucible of suffering. Bane was a strategist, a survivor, and a man who refused to let the world decide his fate. His later life proved that he was not simply the villain who broke Batman's back, but a character whose story was built on resilience, ambition, and the unyielding refusal to ever be broken himself. Bane remains one of the most important figures in Batman's mythos, because his story is not built only on strength, but on resilience, discipline, and willpower. From his earliest days in Peña Duro to his campaigns across Gotham and beyond, he demonstrates how hardship can forge someone into something formidable. Bane is living proof that intellect and patience are as dangerous as brute force, and that true victory often belongs to those willing to wait, study, and strike when the moment is right. Even his dependence on Venom, the drug that once seemed to define him, became a lesson in mastery when he chose to conquer it rather than to let it conquer him. What makes Bane's story resonate is that he challenges Batman in ways most enemies just don't. He does not rely on theatrics or madness. Instead, he represents careful planning, unwavering discipline, and the terrifying efficiency of someone who knows exactly how to dismantle an opponent both physically and mentally. Through him, readers are reminded that even the strongest can fall if they underestimate the value of preparation and patience. Bane's journey also carries lessons that reach beyond the battle between hero and villain. His rise from a life sentence meant to crush him shows how willpower can transform even the cruelest beginnings. His battle with addiction reveals that true strength is measured not only in combat, but in the ability to face one's own weaknesses. His moments of uneasy alliance show that people shaped by darkness can still choose their path, proving that identity is never set in stone. In the end, Bane's legacy is not simply that he broke the Bat, but that he became a symbol of ambition and discipline, forged in suffering. His story reminds us that power is hollow without control, that fear can be used or overcome, and that the chains meant to hold us can, with enough will, be broken.